Edward II. He was on a mission to confront and crush his enemy, the Scottish king, Robert the Bruce. But things didn't go to plan. In a David and Goliath moment, Scots beat a superior English army, and that battle has become interwoven with Scottish mythology and national identity. It happened here, across the waters of the Bannock Burn. By the battle's end, it ran red with the blood of thousands of English soldiers. I am Helen, a 14th century historian, and I want to understand how Bannockburn marked a decisive turning point in the struggle between Scotland and England. The Battle of Bannockburn is one of the most famous battles in history. But what actually happened? What was the blow-by-blow account? And importantly, what was the impact for both England and Scotland? In this programme, I'm heading across the border. I'll visit the key sites where the drama played out, from the monumental fortifications, Stirling Castle, to the actual site of the bloody battle.
I mean, if we had been here 710 years ago, this is kind of the worst place to be. This was right in the thick of the fight.
Wow. Map out the manoeuvres and explore how the Scots used clever battle tactics to outsmart and overpower superior English forces.
These are tightly packed spear formations, so ranks deep of men armed with long spears that present then this bristling wall. It's pretty grisly.
It's completely terrifying. And I'll discover clues buried in ancient documents that reveal the battle's lasting impact on both sides of the border.
They'd just been, completely overrun.
The Scots were effectively stealing everything they had. This is the story of Bannockburn. This is the story of the battle for Scotland. Over 700 years ago, Scotland was engulfed in a brutal war for independence. Edward I, the ruthless English king, had invaded Scotland a decade before, imprisoned Scotland's ruler, and crushed its only major resistance, led by William Wallace. Edward was formidable, but now a new threat had risen, fierce, determined, and more dangerous than ever. King Robert I, popularly known as Robert the Bruce. Edward was determined to crush Scottish resistance once and for all. He mustered an army, once again headed north. In July 1307, Edward north with his army, Berwick-on-Tweed, the largest English garrison in the north of England. His last conquest of Scotland had earned him the nickname Hammer of the Scots. Lying on the borders, Berwick, a valuable port, had been part of Scotland until 1296. Edward had firsted, massacring thousands through the river. The event had marked the beginning of Edward's savage conquest. But this time, there was a problem. At 68 years old, Edward I was increasingly frail and infirm, not the military leader he once was. In 1307, Edward never made it as far as Berwick. On the 7th of July, encamped with his army 89 miles to the southwest at Burr-on-Sands, Edward I died. But lying on his deathbed, Edward had made it clear it should not be the end of the war with Scotland. According to contemporary accounts, Edward wished the campaign to continue, quashing the Scottish rebellion once and for all. Until then, his body was not to be taken home. In fact, it was to be taken into battle. Unfortunately for Edward,
Neither of his wishes. When he died, his son and a man he hoped would continue to hammer the Scots was far away in London. This new English king was Edward II, aged just 23 and lacking his father's military prowess.
When Edward II learned of his father's death, he travelled north to Burr-on-Sands. And then he did go on to Scotland, though not with his father's body, which was taken to Waltham Abbey to lie in state.
This new campaign, led by the new English king, was short-lived. Edward II received homage from the Scottish nobles at Dumfries, but then handed swiftly back to London to be crowned and secure his reign. He had factions and favourites to pacify at home. Meanwhile, in Scotland, Robert the Bruce took his chance to build his power. This is Cambuskenneth Abbey in Stirling, a site where Bruce gathered potential allies.
In 1308, here at Cambuskenneth, Robert the Bruce received oaths from powerful Scottish nobles. To do so in the presence of God, on hallowed ground, was sacred, true, and loaded with consequence.
Unlike Edward II, who inherited the throne as the natural heir, Bruce had to fight to win the allegiance of the Scottish nobles and defeat rival claims. As Robert extended his power by 1310, Edward could no longer ignore him and headed north, intending to crush the rebellion. I'm meeting medieval historian Dr. Jackson Armstrong.
By 1310, Edward II has mustered an army and he does advance on Scotland. How does Robert the Bruce react to that?
The strategy is very much on the Bruce side is to draw the English army in, let them exhaust their energy, time, and resources, and not commit to engagement with them if that can be avoided. And that's what we see what happens when Edward II does return to Scotland in 1310. He brings an army with him, but Bruce avoids him in the field. The English army proceeds up the Clyde, gets as far as Glasgow, proceeds over to Stirling, and then back eventually over to Berwick.
Edward may have been looking for a fight, but Bruce was playing a cat-and-mouse game. He knew the Scottish landscape far better than Edward. To the growing frustration of the English army, Bruce evaded his forces.
It's a very effective military strategy. He's looking long-term. He's playing the long game, I suppose.
Yeah, I think what's the prize that he's seeking? He's wanting recognition of his kingship, both within the Scottish kingdom, but externally as well, from rulers like England or the King of Norway. He's wanting peace. He wants an end to the war so that he can consolidate his rule at home. That's the prize that he's seeking, and is very focused on what's the practical way to achieve that objective.
Robert knew that his forces were dwarfed by Edward's, and that a head-to-head confrontation would likely spell disaster. Instead of seeking conflict, he opted for a diplomatic approach. Or so it seemed on paper.
Robert the Bruce writes this letter to Edward II, very much stipulating. And this comes across to be cool, even affable, to the most serene prince, the Lord Edward, by God's grace, illustrious King of England. Robert, by the same grace, King of Scots. But then, reading on, it starts to develop a very different tone, and we start to see a threat come through. You would take pains to cease from the persecution of us and the disturbance of the people of our kingdom, in order that devastation and the spilling of Christian blood may henceforth stop. What Robert the Bruce means by this is that unless Edward II accepts his kingship and ceases to persecute Scotland, it is not Scottish blood that will spill, but English.
Whether or not Edward II was frightened by this threat, after a difficult winter campaigning, the English king was left with little choice. He retreated home to England again. While the English were in turmoil, in stark contrast, the Scots were increasingly unified and emboldened. The fragile border between Scotland and England, running from west from the Solway Firth to Berwick in the east, became a ferociously fought-over, lawless frontier zone that Robert the Bruce frequently crossed.
He took his fight across the borders and started to raid. Robert the Bruce was not trying to redefine the border or expand his territory. He was trying to show the lack of leadership in England, and it was working. In Northumberland, people paid over £2,000 in a tribute payment to Robert the Bruce. That's over £1 million by today's standards. This cross-border raiding filled Robert the Bruce's pockets. He collected these tribute payments across the north of England. He was able to steal livestock, pushing them across the border. He was able to recruit steel and iron from places like Corbridge. This could fortify castles, build siege engines, and make armor. But most importantly, he was able to demoralize the English. And when they turned to their king for protection, he let them down. Edward II was becoming weaker, the north was becoming a frontier zone, and Robert the Bruce was only becoming stronger.
On the Scottish side of the border, Bruce mounted a systematic attack on all the major English strongholds, targeting castle after castle after castle. By 1314, only two remained under English control, Bothwell and Stirling. The latter now became the prime focus of his campaign. In Robert's mind, Stirling had to fall. He allocated the task of taking the castle to his brother, Edward Bruce.
Though most of what we see now is a 15th and 16th century rebuild, the location of Stirling Castle remains the same. Built on this steep and rocky crag, the views go across the landscape for miles. Taking this castle by force would have been a monumental task for Edward Bruce.
Edward lacked the manpower or machines needed to conquer such a heavily defended fortification. Instead, he chose to lay siege and wait to starve the English out.
So, Jackson, Stirling Castle is visually spectacular, but why was it so strategically important?
So the significance of Stirling is this is the crossroads which is commanding both access to the north and the south. It's also, second point, in relation to its symbolic significance. And one of the ways in which Stirling is identified in this period is as a castle with an alternative name. It's known as Snowdon, and that has Arthurian myths associated with it. So in Arthurian legends, one of the significant castles controlled by King Arthur is Snowdon. So that has significance for any king who's seeking to command within the island of Great Britain.
Propaganda is very important even in the Middle Ages, isn't it?
And we can certainly see it in play in the context of the Wars of Independence. 1308, there's a letter to Edward II from an unknown Scottish noble in Scotland saying that the English army better come and deal with Robert Bruce's rebellion north of the border because the people are speaking of the Arthurian myth and the prophecy associated with Merlin, that the Scots and the Welsh are seeking to rise together and to dominate the island. So a third point I'd like to make is in relation to the question of, is there a capital of Scotland in the early 1300s? If there is, Stirling has as good a claim to be the capital of Scotland as anywhere else.
With both strategic and symbolic significance, control of Stirling Castle was vital for anyone seeking to dominate Scotland. The English understood the dire consequences of losing this prize. But under Scottish siege, the castle's English commander, Sir Philip de Mowbray, had little choice but to strike a deal.
Sir Philip de Mowbray sent a proposal with Bruce. If, by Midsummer's Day, the castle had not been taken by force, then he would surrender it altogether. The clock was finally ticking for what was an inevitable down between Edward II and Robert the Bruce.
The story goes that Edward II, in distant London, didn't learn about the deal until after it had been made. On hearing the news, he decided to launch his biggest campaign into Scotland. His target, to get to Stirling before Midsummer's Day. He arrived in Berwick on the 19th of May. By now, Edward had gathered together a formidable army, 15,000 men, including infantry and archers, and another 2,000 cavalry, led by the most elite and battle-hardened warriors of the age. He was keen to be seen as a successful warrior king, just like his father.
Edward was so confident of his victory, he even employed a Carmelite friar called William Baston to record his victory in verse. He wanted to go down in history as a warrior king, another hammer of the Scots. What he didn't take into account was the skill of his enemy, Robert the Bruce.
Robert was also on the move, and this time, in a change of strategy, he was preparing for a full-on, face-to-face battle. Determined to cut Edward off before he reached Stirling Castle, Bruce moved 3.5 miles southwest of the castle to train his forces. He was setting the scene for one of the most decisive battles in the war for Scottish independence. To find out why Bruce chose this spot and how he began readying his army, I'm meeting resident historian Dr. Callum Watson here at the Bannock Burn Centre.
So obviously the landscape has changed a lot since 1314, and it doesn't look exactly as it did then, but you can still get an idea as to where he was, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bruce gathers his army in an area known as the Torwood, which would have begun basically just at the ridge there. So it's this ancient area of parkland. There is some woodland, as we would understand it, but there's also some moorland, there's open areas and so forth. And Bruce gathers his army there and gets them training, gets them preparing for the battle that's to come, to pull off his plan.
Bruce had to act quickly. He had just 1 month to get his men battle ready. His army was far smaller and less experienced than the English forces, but Bruce was resourceful and devised new tactics to surprise his enemy.
There are a couple of novelties, there are a couple of new ways of fighting that Bruce is going to use here, in part to catch the English out. The English king would love a big pitched battle out in a nice big field somewhere where he can make the most of the fact that he is going to massively outnumber the Scottish army. Robert, though, is making his preparations for a battle that's much more on his terms.
With his much smaller force, Robert aimed to make use of his superior knowledge of the local woods and moors. But he also had another military trick up his sleeve.
So this is where we come on to our Shiltrons, which is...
the infamous Shiltrons of the Battle of Bannockburn.
Yeah. I mean, it's an old Scots word that basically means a big group of guys, essentially. These are tightly packed spear formations, so ranks deep of men armed with long spears that present then this bristling wall.
And they've been described as if they were like hedgehogs almost.
Yeah, so Bruce forms up his army into 3 big Shiltrons, 3 big divisions.
So you've got 3 formations, perhaps thousands of men, but what made them particularly lethal is the fact that these weren't defensive devices, they were offensive.
Yeah.
And that was the real difference with Robert the Bruce's tactics during the Battle of Bannockburn. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. So traditionally, these schiltrons have been oval-shaped spears pointing in every direction, which is great for defense. It means wherever you attack from, you're facing a bristling wall of spears. But of course, then that means they can't move. To try and go in any direction, half of the guys would have to walk backwards. So they can take a lot of punishment from, say, horsemen, but they're just a big, easy target for archers.
But Robert the Bruce adapted the schiltron formation. His spearmen, now facing forward, were no longer static and only defensive. They could advance. They could go on the attack.
This is not something the English have seen before. This is not something they're expecting coming up that road.
That's terrifying, kind of.
It is. It's pretty grisly.
Completely terrifying.
In June 1314, as midsummer neared, Edward's forces began snaking their way along the road from Falkirk towards Stirling, having recruited men across the north.
Never had such an army marched out of England, recorded one chronicler. Cavalry, infantry, archers, a baggage train lasting 20 miles long. The sight must have been incredible.
But the Scots were ready and waiting. This was what exactly Bruce had planned for. On the 23rd of June, the English army paused here near the water of the Bannock Burn. This unassuming stream would go down as one of the most decisive battle sites in history. It was here that the two forces first collided.
So we've followed now basically the route that the real English army would have taken on the 23rd of June, the first day of battle. And we're actually fairly confident that this area of the burn, this is where they make their first attempt to cross the Bannock Burn.
Gosh, so that was the road that you believe was the road the English marched down, a whole 20-mile-long procession of knights and infantry and archers, and then they reach this body of water, which is actually surprisingly quite narrow. What happens when they reach this point?
Yeah, so one knight in particular, a gentleman called Sir Henry de Bohun, seems to get here first. He might be riding about a bow shot ahead of the rest of the army. And reputedly, when he arrives here, he sees on the far side of the burn King Robert himself, just riding along the front line of his army, reviewing the troops, not here to fight, but make sure everybody else is ready to fight. Robert, not, it seems, particularly ready for battle at this point, may not even have all of his armor and regalia on, but he is wearing a gold circlet around his helmet so that people can tell that he's the king. That's how Henry can tell that he's the king. And Henry sees this as his moment. He could ride across the burn here, charge straight up to King Robert, skewer him.
Henry de Bohun was ecstatic. He had the chance to kill Robert here and now, before any battle had been fought. Glory was within his grasp. Seizing the moment, he charged across the river.
Right, so Henry de Bohun has just thundered across the river, and he gets to this point. What happens? He sees Robert the Bruce ahead.
He does indeed, and he goes charging towards him, lance couched.
Full tilt.
Yeah, ready
Right.
just to turn him into a kebab. Robert, on the other hand, races towards him too, as if this was going to be a tilt, as if this was going to be a joust. Robert is armed though with an axe, and he stands in his stirrups as Henry comes past him so that the lance point misses him. And he brings that axe down on Henry's head. One source says with so much vigor, with so much power, that it actually goes through Henry's helmet, the hat underneath, and cleaves him to the harness, to the brains. Henry might even never feel the blow. It probably switches him off like a light, but down he goes, and now the first thing the Scots have seen is their king kill an English knight as if it was nothing. And the English, of course, the rest of the English army waiting to cross here, have seen exactly the same thing.
It was a devastating blow for the entire English force. But despite this catastrophic start, they attempted to join the fray, charging across the burn. But almost immediately, it was clear that by choosing this place and through planning, Bruce's troops had the upper hand.
And you mentioned before how narrow it is. You'd have to be very comfortable with the people around you to get more than maybe about 4 or 5 guys across at a time. Now that is fine, English think, because on the other side, in theory, they can spread out as wide as they like and start using those numbers against the Scots. But Bruce has yet another trick up his sleeve, because on either side of the road here, he has had his men dig these honeycombed pits, possibly filled with sharpened stakes, a contrivance full of evils, one source calls them. And that means that the cavalry, the horsemen, they can't spread out again on this side. And so about as narrow as this, that's probably about as wide as the cavalry can get here to try and attack the Scots.
Which really gives the Scots the upper hand, because then they're just picking off knights one by one as they would come through, which of course the English soon realise.
Yeah.
Demoralised and humiliated, the English were forced to make a temporary retreat before more damage was done.
This has been a bit of a shock to the system.
So what this is really showing to me is just how disorganised the English were. I mean, they are about to go into pitched battle and the vanguard are riding ahead. They've got nobody marshalling them, nobody giving orders. They don't really seem to know what they're doing at all. Contrasting that, you've got Robert the Bruce, who is really using the terrain to his advantage. They are completely misunderstanding the strength of Robert the Bruce at this point.
Absolutely, they're still seeing him as this guerrilla leader who is just going to fade into the hills at the first opportunity. Doesn't really seem to have crossed anybody's mind at this point that Bruce might have something new in store, that Bruce may actually have used the month or so he's had to prepare to come up with something a little bit unusual, to come up with something that allows him to break the habit of a lifetime here and actually try to fight a pitched battle and actually beat them.
It's clear from day one that things aren't going well for the English. They have been marching for hundreds of miles. They haven't had time to pause, to rest, to eat. They're trying to make that Midsummer's Day deadline. And then they reach here and they lose a key member of the vanguard. But what is also becoming more clear to me, just being in this landscape, though the English army was greater in size, it did not mean that they had the greater advantage.
With Robert commanding the stream, the English fell back and camped in a marshy area across the Bannock Burn, resting as they prepared for battle. Edward remained confident. The following day, he would crush the Scots. But as dawn broke on the 24th of June, just days after the year's longest day, divisions spread through his camp. While Edward was eager for battle, not all of his allies shared his enthusiasm.
The king's nephew, the Earl of Gloucester, urged caution. Rest your army, live to fight another day. But the king scorned his advice furiously, and an argument ensued. Eventually, the Earl of Gloucester capitulated. He turned to his uncle and said, "Today, I will prove I am no traitor."
King Edward was determined to fight the Scots in a pitched battle. As the English argued, the Scots united. Where modern-day woods and streets lie, the same land around Bannockburn filled with the sounds of armies preparing for battle. Emboldened, the Scots gathered at the hill's crest, ready to strike from above. Callum has brought me to the very spot where the surprise manoeuvre unfolded.
So we're now advancing down through Balquideric Wood, as the Scots did on the morning of the 24th of June, second day of the battle. They'd spent the night up there in the New Park and had had a really crucial defection from the English army, a guy called Alexander Seaton, who crosses over from the English army. He is a Scot by birth, crosses over from the English army, though, into the Scottish camp, bringing with him intelligence all of which is music to Bruce's ears about how low the morale is. And so the battle is on for day 2.
So they were pretty well prepared by this point.
Yeah, the level of sort of confidence and intensity in Bruce's army is probably as high as it's ever going to be. Everything's gone right on the first day.
Opposed to the English.
Yeah, the exact opposite of what the English have experienced. So yeah, the Scots are up at the crack of dawn, maybe as early about 4 in the morning. As soon as the sun rises in the east there, the Scots are up. They move out of the new park, down through Balquiderick Wood, and they form up at the bottom of the hill, out on the Carse, trapping the English where they've spent the night.
The Scottish troops headed down to the bottom of the hill through the wood in their Schiltron formations. The English were now trapped here between 2 streams, the Bannock Burn to the south and Pell Stream to the northeast.
So the English are camped down here on the flat ground in between the Bannock Burn to the south and the Pell Stream to the northeast flow together in a nice big V shape, which they think overnight has given them a reasonably defensive position, but is only going to serve to trap them once the Scots are down here in the morning.
So the English are down here. That's not a great position for them by this point.
No, it's not. Between 2 streams down on this flat ground, but it's about the best they've been able to achieve. Once Bruce has stopped them getting into the new park, this is the next easiest place to cross the burn. They do have access to the fresh water of the 2 streams. That probably seems pretty vital after 13 miles from Falkirk. And during the night, the streams at least protect them on all but one side from any Scottish raiding. And of course, the English still are not expecting the Scots to go on the offensive. So although it sort of seems like the right place to camp, actually all they've done is walk into Bruce's trap.
Bruce had cunningly kettled the English forces into this confined space. Now their superior numbers were no longer an advantage, and they had other problems.
And some accounts have said that they've been up in the night drinking, and they've spent half of the time moving their army off the road to find that camp on the Carseland. So they have had little to no time to actually prepare, actually think about how they are going to form if there is going to be battle.
Yeah, the closest thing the English have to a plan again is really just try and get stuck into the Scots at the first opportunity.
So everywhere they look, there's water on each side, and then ahead of them is an advancing Scottish army carrying these enormous spears that are going to do a significant amount of damage.
Yeah, you have Bannockburn to the south of you, Pell Stream to the north, and this bristling wall of spears in between both here to the west.
So they're already not in a very good position.
And that means that the best place left open to them is this area between the 2 streams, down on the Carse. It also just happens to be exactly where Robert wants them. This is all part of the plan to lure the English into that narrow space where suddenly that one big advantage that the English have, their numbers, doesn't mean anything anymore.
Should we go ahead and see what the battlefield looks like today?
Sounds good.
Historians and archaeologists have been able to map out exactly where the final Battle of Bannockburn took place. Not easy, as the site is now almost completely hidden underneath a housing estate. Although some clues still exist. The Schiltron Way, Mace Court, all evoking weapons and manoeuvres from the battle.
Okay, Claymore Drive, Claymore Big Sword.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of these kind of road names, street names here, these are one of the main sort of signs.
There's another one over there.
Yeah, Glaive Avenue. I mean, if we had been here 710 years ago, this is kind of the worst place to be. This is right in the thick of the fighting.
Wow. So can you give me now a blow-by-blow account of what happened? Because we are on the battlefield and we're trying to reimagine it. We're in the fray. The Scots are here. What goes on?
Yeah, so right at the start, before the fighting has even begun, once the Scots are in formation, we do get this really curious story of the Scots kneeling in prayer. Now, it's a holy day, it's St. John the Baptist's day, but this apparently causes some consternation in the English army. Edward apparently believes that this is the Scots coming to surrender, and it's left to a nearby Scottish knight, maybe a guy called Sir Ingram Umfraville, guy from northeast Scotland, to turn to Edward and say, no, they're not begging for mercy from you. They're begging for mercy from God.
This is not a surrender.
No, absolutely. They're praying for forgiveness for all the English blood they're about to spill on such a holy day.
As the two armies faced off here, Edward still believed that he would thrash the Scots. And at first, things seemed to go well. We're using computer graphics to help show how events unfolded here on the Carse 700 years ago. Edward II, leading his huge force of over 20,000 heavy cavalry, infantry and archers. Bruce with less than half that number. The battle began in typical medieval style, a shooting match.
So the first action is that the English archers come forward and skirmish with the Scottish archers, who are far fewer than the English archers and nothing like as skilled, and so surprised that the Scottish archers come off worse in that. But then the English archers pull back to allow the cavalry forward. These are Edward's shock troops. He's fighting in quite a 13th century style here, relying very heavily on his cavalry charge to panic and scatter the infantry, allow the rest of his soldiers to come up and mop up any pockets of resistance that are left.
Led by the king's own nephew, the Earl of Gloucester, the man he argued with the night before, Edward's formidable cavalry charged forward, thundering towards the Scots. These horses could reach speeds of around 4 kilometers per hour. They expected to blast through their enemy, except they didn't.
And the spearmen don't panic, and they don't scatter. They stand their ground, presenting this bristling wall of spears to the English cavalry. A lot of the horses probably refuse to charge. Unfortunately for the Earl of Gloucester, though, his apparently does. It may be that he is not even wearing his surcoat that would display his coat of arms. That would tell everybody on the other side that, even if it didn't tell them he was the Earl of Gloucester, it would tell them that they were important enough to be able to demand a ransom.
Of course, because the story goes that he was in such a fit of rage after his row with the king, he forgot to put it on before he charged off into battle.
So he looks just like any other knight, and he dies just like any other knight as well.
Having repelled the cavalry, the Scottish Schiltrons did something the English were not expecting. They advanced. An unprecedented move. No longer defensive, they were on the attack, just as Bruce had planned.
Once the cavalry realize that they can't break through these Schiltron formations, they try to pull back, put some distance between them and the Schiltrons, maybe even allow the archers through to see if they can punch some holes in them. Bruce's Schiltrons, remember, don't just stand there, they can move. This is the big trick Bruce has been working on.
They're trained to be offensive rather than just defensive. Exactly.
Absolutely. And so as soon as the cavalry pulls back, the spearmen advance forward, gobbling up all that space.
Slowly but surely, Bruce's Schiltrons moved forward, squeezing the English cavalry and army back towards the streams, into an ever tighter and tighter space, with nowhere to maneuver.
So by this point, they are entirely penned in with the river behind them. And what's happened to the archers?
Yeah, so the archers are trapped behind their own cavalry. They can't get a clear shot at those Scottish Schiltrons, the spearmen, without hitting their own men. And any time they try to shuffle around to get through, to get a clear shot, the spearmen just fill up that space instead, squeezing the English down into this ever tighter space.
Really happy with this point and the impact that he's going to be observing this. But where is Edward II? Where's the English king? Is he in the melee, or is he observing, or has he run away?
Yeah, so in theory, Edward should be directing things kind of from the back too, but instead he finds himself right in the thick of things, a sign that things are not going well. He has a horse killed under him here. A lot of his household are killed or captured trying to protect him. He himself is described in one source as having to take a mace, so a big lump of wood with a metal bit on the end, and literally beat aside the hands thousands of Scots who are reaching up to try and pull him down from his horse and take him prisoner.
Eventually, it was clear that the English were doomed. Edward fled, or was perhaps dragged from the fray, and headed for the supposed safety of Stirling Castle.
What happens there when he gets to the gates of Stirling?
So the garrison remind the king what a horrible idea this is. If he goes inside the castle, the garrison are going to have to surrender to the Scots, and if they surrender the castle with Edward in it, Edward becomes Bruce's prisoner. That means he's lost the war, never mind the battle. He'll be traded back to the English for recognition of Bruce's rights as King of Scots. Edward can't afford that, and so instead he takes a ship for England and relative safety.
Edward fled from Stirling to Dunbar, then by ship back to England. For the English, Bannockburn was a disaster. Thousands were slaughtered. It's said the waters ran red with their blood. For Bruce and the Scots, it was a historic triumph. David had beaten Goliath. 6 months later, Bruce held Parliament near Stirling, in the same place where he had secured the nobles' oath 6 years earlier. It was time to reward loyalty and punish dissent.
In November 1314, invigorated by his victory at Bannockburn, Robert the Bruce held Parliament here at Cambuskenneth. This was his opportunity to follow through with his threat and disinherit those who had not pledged their loyalty to him as King of Scotland. Their lands were redistributed to those who were loyal both on and off the battlefield. In doing so, Robert the Bruce created a united Scotland, pushing his enemies over the border. Through his success at Bannockburn, Robert the Bruce paved the way for an independent Scotland.
Edward and his forces were utterly humiliated at Bannockburn, a defeat so crushing he couldn't hide the fact they'd been thoroughly thrashed. Yet, he stubbornly refused to recognise Bruce's kingship. But Bruce kept up the pressure, raiding northern England as Edward's people began voicing their discontent. I'm heading to the National Archives in London, where extraordinary volumes of 700-year-old documents, written mostly in medieval French, to be read by the authorities in London, reveal clues about the growing frustration and horror of the situation. The voices pour off the page.
My lands have been burnt. I now have nothing to sustain me and my children. Christina de Waddrington.
The Church of Kirby has been ruined and robbed. Robert de Valois.
Lands in Northumberland are wasted, and my tenants are dead. Elizabeth, Countess of Angus.
So, Paul, this is a series of many petitions from the north of England around the time after the Battle of Bannockburn. And would you say, realistically, that petitions are one of the best ways to gain some idea of what people were experiencing during this period? And that's the regular person, that's not the kings and the earls. These are people who were living in this community at the time.
Yeah, so at the National Archives, we've got approximately 17,000 original petitions submitted to Parliament in the Middle Ages, of which, and these are a sample few, these are from sort of the early 14th century.
These remarkable documents reveal the terrifying hardships felt by ordinary people in the north of England as Bruce raided their lands and forced them to hand over their money and possessions.
The Scots were effectively stealing everything they had.
Yeah.
And there is a specific reference to a woman who's living in this region in this petition called Christina.
Yeah, who was the wife of John de Widdrington, who I think is probably a Northumberland knight. And it says that whereas John was killed on the day of Stirling. Now, I think that means the Battle of Bannockburn, really.
Yeah.
So it's a euphemism that doesn't include the word defeat or
So she
terrible loss.
cannot say loss.
No.
Is that to protect the ego of the king?
Probably, yeah. You often see things like discomfiture as used, or disturbance, rather than victory of the Scots or defeat of the king or whatever.
And it says that she's left with trois enfants.
Yeah.
So she's left with 3 children.
Yeah. So he's killed at Bannock Burn. All of his lands are then burnt and destroyed by the Scots, and all of his chattels, so the movable goods he's got, are taken away by the Scots, and that she and her 3 children have therefore got nothing to live on. And sort of from 1311-ish, so even before Bannock Burn, the Scots introduce lightning raids into northern England, and they go on for over a decade, because despite Bannock Burn, and despite their ability to run wild effectively over much of northern England, Edward II, his magnates, they won't come to the table. Edward is not going to recognise Bruce's kingship, and he's not going to recognise the independence of Scotland, no matter what.
So he's using these raids to push Edward to accept his independent kingship.
Yeah.
So his independent sovereignty of Scotland, which Edward will never do,
No.
so the people of the north are suffering as a consequence. It's a frontier zone.
Exactly.
As these petitions reveal, no one's family or home was safe from Bruce's raids, not even a house of God. This particular plea comes from an abbess.
What happens in this situation when the Scots are attacking a religious house?
Yeah, so I mean here, it's the prioress and convent of Holstone in Redesdale, so Northumberland again.
So she's right in the danger zone.
Oh, she's big in the danger zone. And she basically says that whereas, that they have been destroyed by the enemies, the Scottish enemies coming across the border again, and they're just being, completely overrun. They're literally right in the front line.
Religious houses offered rich pickings. The north was now a frontier zone, and everyone felt the impact.
There is so much evidence of what people were experiencing on the borders as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's another one from the people. There's more of a communal petition from the people themselves.
Yeah.
And it says here that it's from the county of Northumberland.
Yeah, so the people of the community of the county of Northumberland, yeah.
Was that a common practice for a collective of people to petition rather than an individual?
Yeah, so there are lots of what we call common petitions, and it can be from whole county communities, it could be from the people of a town, people of a village, or it could even be foreign merchants or representatives of a town overseas.
But this one is from the people of Northumberland.
Indeed, yeah, Northumberland, yeah.
And it talks about how the Scots have destroyed their community, taken all of their goods, and they have been unable to pay their taxes because of that, because they have nothing.
Yeah.
These petitions are really the closest thing as a medieval historian that we have to voice in the period, and that's voice from the masses, not voice from the nobility or the king or the queen. I mean, this is what people felt and experienced, written down by a clerk, but orated to that clerk. So you have some idea of how people were feeling.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you've got to be a little bit careful, because obviously these are written mediations of an oral complaint.
So they have agenda.
And they have agenda, and they were, of course, presented to the king, his council, whatever it would be. But generally speaking, I think what the problems and the complaints that these people are expressing are, I think, as close as we can probably get to lived experience and the voices of people of all levels of society, probably above the village. And even then, there was one petition I used recently, which is allegedly from a 6-year-old girl.
Bannockburn was more than battle, it was a reckoning. A nation's fate was sealed in blood as Bruce's strategy shattered Edward's might. A triumph of wit over force. The petitions that followed told of England's humiliation, a king in retreat, a nation reeling. Edward never recovered. With the north lost and his rule crumbling, his reign unravelled. Bruce, unchallenged, secured Scotland's future until his death in 1329, memorialised as a national hero. In 1326, Edward II was forced to give up his crown, dying the following year, imprisoned, alone and in disgrace. 7 centuries on, Bannockburn's legacy still endures.